Before departing on their 1975 voyage to become the first ever spacecraft to set foot, or really set landing pad on Mars, the Viking 1 and 2 landers had one final task. They had to get baked. No, I'm not referring to some type of a final going away party with Cheech and Chong for these billion-dollar machines. Rather, I mean that scientists wearing sterile garb like this literally put these machines into an oven and baked them for nearly 60 hours straight. Why? NASA wanted to ensure that there were no earthly microbes clinging to these cosmic tourists before blasting them off into space and eventually to the red planet. In doing so, NASA complied with that law you all are so familiar with, right? The 1967 UN Outer Space Treaty. Yes, there really is a United Nations space treaty, and no, it is not a treaty between us and the aliens, some secret treaty. Rather, it is a treaty among spacefaring nations, including the United States, requiring us to avoid harmful contamination of celestial bodies. Even today, any scientist doing critical work around any of our interplanetary emissaries that might be going anywhere potentially hospitable to life in our solar system have to dress in these kinds of extreme sterile garb. Now, of course, we don't have one of those machines with us right now, and I don't even work at NASA anyway, so I don't need to be wearing any of this. But suffice it to say that there are a number of sensitive instruments that we would love to send into outer space and to other places in our solar system that we just can't send because, quite frankly, they are too sensitive to withstand the extreme sterilization that we require before sending them. So think about it like this. In Star Trek, they have the prime directive, right? It prevents Captain Kirk and crew from harming local inhabitants as they travel the cosmos. Well, NASA has its own version of that with its Office of Planetary Protection. And NASA has its own Captain Kirk, a remarkable scientist named Cassie Conley. Dr. Conley's office is tasked with preventing NASA from doing to Martians essentially what European explorers did to Native Americans with smallpox, or for that matter, what invasive species like kudzu are doing right now in your backyard. Now, of course, such precautions are important for the integrity of our scientific research. We don't want to discover life on Mars only to find out that actually our machines accidentally brought it there with them. At the same time, though, we also don't want to not discover life on Mars because we accidentally wiped it out before we could even find it. And that is what is so interesting. It's impressive the extent to which humanity is going to prevent harming potential aliens we might encounter out there. Keep in mind, we don't wear these type of extreme protective garbs in order to protect ourselves around these machines. We wear them to protect anyone our landers and our rovers might encounter out there from us. Yet, this also raises quite an uncomfortable question. Because if we are so concerned about protecting living beings who we don't even know exist on other planets, what about the living beings with whom we share our own planet right here? If we do find life on Mars, it's possible we may not share any DNA with them, if they even have DNA at all. Yet right here on Earth, we abuse animals to whom we know we are genetically related. That is to say, we know we have common ancestors with them. In other words, we don't always act as our brother's keeper, or our sister's keeper, or our cousin's keeper, as the case may be. After all, we know for certain that these genetic relatives of ours, who we call animals, as if we weren't also animals ourselves, can feel pain. Yet, we routinely cause them to suffer in ways that ignore even their most vital interests. Just think about it. We allow circuses to beat elephants and tigers into submission, to force them to perform tricks for our amusement. We allow cosmetics companies to torment rabbits and other animals simply for our vanity products. We also allow the fur industry to slaughter wildlife wholesale as if we needed their coats more than they do. But perhaps nowhere is our disregard for life on Earth as stark as it is in our food industry. In fact, I would go so far as to say if aliens ever do come and visit us here on Earth, they're probably not going to be that impressed by how we treated the animals who we raise for food. Let's just conduct one thought experiment. So by show of hands, who here has a male dog at home? Okay, in the front, what's your name? And Tony, what's your dog's name? All right, so let's just imagine a scenario where Tony brings her dog Duke to the veterinarian. And Tony says, hey doc, I'm really concerned about pet overpopulation. Would you please neuter Duke? The veterinarian says, sure, no problem, Tony. And he pulls out a scalpel and just goes to town on Duke, cutting his testicles out without any pain relief whatsoever. What do you think would happen? He gets sued? Might have his license taken, might even get charged with criminal animal cruelty. Now, let's consider an alternative thought experiment. Imagine that Tony doesn't take Duke the dog, but takes Duke the pig. And instead of to a veterinarian, she takes him to an untrained farmhand who has no animal care experience whatsoever, and he does the same exact thing, cuts Duke's testicles out without pain relief. What do you think then would happen to Duke the pig? Nothing. Because such behavior is standard operating practice in the meat industry in America. Farm animals have so little legal protection that the meat industry can get away with doing to pigs and calves what would get them put in prison if the victims were dogs and cats. It's so bad to the point where now cutting animals' genitals off with no pain relief is a matter of routine practice, subjected to millions of animals every single year in our country alone. In other words, if a technologically superior alien civilization does ever come visit us here, we better hope that they treat us with a little bit more compassion than we treat the other animals on our planet. I'd like to think that they would have some type of a malice toward none and charity toward all credo of Abraham Lincoln, but if alien sci-fi flicks have anything to tell us, well, we better hope that they don't find us. If the cruelty that these agribusinesses inflict on animals weren't enough, the problem of farming these animals is also causing massive problems for wildlife here on Earth, too. At the same time as we are admirably seeking to avoid causing extinctions on Mars, we seem to have a much more difficult time doing anything about the extinctions that we are causing right here on Earth. As we speak, our planet is undergoing its 6th mass extinction event. Though unlike the last major extinction, which took out the dinosaurs, this time around, the culprit is not an asteroid from the heavens. It's us Homo sapiens right here on Earth. And our desire to eat such a meat-heavy diet is a leading driver in so much of this species' decline. In fact, the World Wildlife Fund reports that the majority of global biodiversity loss can be traced to our desire to eat so much meat. Perhaps it's unsurprising then that Bill Nye, the science guy, the CEO of the Planetary Institute, says that even if for environmental reasons alone, humanity is going to have to shift toward a more plant-based diet. Perhaps the easiest thing for each of us to do right now to reduce the amount of harm that we are causing here on Earth is simply to do as Bill Nye suggests and just eat less meat and enjoy more plant-based meals. Already, Bill's buddy, Neil deGrasse Tyson, is doing exactly that. The famed astrophysicist says that he eats meat now only once or twice per week. But just as NASA sets an example with its do no harm policy on Mars, the agency may have helped lead to a technological advancement here on Earth that would allow us to start doing a lot less harm here as well. You see, right around the turn of the century, NASA began funding research into growing real meat outside of animals. No, we're not talking here about alternatives to meat. We are talking about real meat simply grown with vastly fewer resources than are needed to raise entire animals simply to slaughter them. It's called clean meat, in part because, like clean energy, it's so much cleaner for the planet. And NASA's interest in growing this real meat from animal cells as opposed to animal slaughter was spawned when the agency recognized that if humans ever do start traveling the cosmos, they're not going to be carrying Noah's Ark in tow. Rather, if they want meat, they're going to have to grow it. And NASA certainly did not invent the idea. After all, as any self-respecting sci-fi geek like myself knows, clean meat is how they ate meat on Star Trek. Because animal agribusiness is such a leading cause of climate change, air, water, and soil pollution, land and water use, and more, NASA's research to divorce meat production from livestock raising may enable us to start more closely aligning our own actions here on Earth with the admirable principles the agency uses to guide its exploration of space. Already there are clean meat startups racing to commercialize their products, and having eaten many of them myself, I can tell you, I think a lot of Earthlings are going to be pretty psyched to eat it too. And as one NASA Martian researcher, Brian Ottens, observes, clean meat is likely to be a hit here on Earth long before humans ever start colonizing the solar system. We humans are amazing animals. Our capacity to consider the interests of others is so great that we take extreme precaution to leave as minimal a footprint on other celestial bodies as we can. Yet at the same time, our capacity for callousness and cruelty is also seemingly vast, as evidenced by how little we do to prevent even the most heinous abuse of our own planetary brethren. Perhaps it was put best by famed astronomer Carl Sagan and his wife, Anne Druyan, when they co-wrote in their book, Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors. Humans who enslave, castrate, experiment on, and fillet other animals have had an understandable penchant for pretending animals do not feel pain. A sharp distinction between humans and animals is essential if we're to bend them to our will, make them work for us, wear them, eat them, without any disquieting tinges of guilt or regret. It is unseemly of us who often behave so unfeelingly toward other animals to contend that only humans can suffer. The behavior of other animals renders such pretensions specious. They are just too much like us. So far, we've not found life anywhere else. And if we do, I pray that we will treat them with respect. But there is one place in our solar system where we know that life does exist, right here on Earth. As our rovers roll around Martian soil with little chance of harming anyone who they might encounter up there, perhaps the rest of us can take a lesson from Cassie Conley and the folks at NASA. If they go to such extreme lengths to prevent harming aliens or even alien microbes they might encounter elsewhere in our solar system, perhaps the rest of us can try to adopt a similar mindset and try to do as little harm as possible to our fellow animals here at home as well. Thank you.